Hey everyone, welcome back to Cosmic Alarm Clock. Been a minute. I thought this podcast was dead, but I didn't remove it from Spotify. Potentially there was something behind it. So we're not going to do backstory right now. We'll do backstory towards the end of the episode. This episode is being recorded in the energy of the Capricorn Full Moon on July 10th of 2025, but its energies are ever present, and I'll explain why. If you recall, this podcast started on the Virgo full moon, March, whatever the Virgo full moon was. I believe it was March of 22. And I always get downloads on the full moon, which is why I tried to make this like a monthly podcast where it dropped in like the first of the month like other astrologers do. And that was bullshit, and now half of astrology is AI shit. Which my stuff isn't, as you know. And so I'm going to record this and release this. Because as we speak, Saturn is stopped. It officially goes retrograde at about 12 a.m. on the 13th, but Saturn stopped. In the early degrees of Aries. And we have a Capricorn full moon. So we've got a lot of Saturn energy right now. Now, what is Saturn energy? It's fear, it's the future, it's our elder selves, it's long-term planning, and full moons are maximum light. So since this is a spontaneous episode, I'm going to keep this brief. But that's just kind of what's coming up right now. We're in the Cancer moon cycle. Cancer is about what's nourishing to ourselves, our childhood selves, and Capricorn's like, all right, what's going to sustain you for the long haul? Both are important, and it really depends on where you are on your journey of life. I'm about to turn 48 in about 2 months, rough math. And so, of course, at 48, if you don't know, that's pre-Chiron territory. You start to enter Chiron return territory. It's called pre-Chiron at 48 years old. It's old enough that I can say I'm kind of half dead. And that's if I'm lucky. So you start to think about what's the long-term plan. So I have a lot of projects that I've started since this whole thing started, which was August 8th of 2021, Lionsgate. And I have an episode that's going to be dropping in August on my other podcast, which is called The Unscripted Path. That's on all the players. You can check that out. That's not an astrology podcast. There are going to be a few episodes that I drop that have to do with Uranus entering Gemini, which just happened this week, and other things. But that is a business, mindset, human design, life podcast. It's not astrology. However, I do talk about the 8-8. And so as the light starts to build on that, I'm like, what is the long-term plan for me with that? What is the long-term plan for me with this? I don't even know. But Capricorn full moon, because this is spontaneous, I haven't done like a deep astro dive in terms of all the stuff that's happening, but a couple of things that are happening is spontaneous, is that this full moon is happening at roughly 18 degrees of Cap, which means that the sun is roughly at 18 degrees of Cancer. And you guys know about the big Mars retrograde in Cancer that happened earlier this year. I did a masterclass on it called Primal Energy. It's in the show notes of my new podcast. And it was all about Mars retrograde in Cancer, Pluto entering Aquarius. It was a double masterclass. And Mars stationed direct in Cancer at 17 degrees of Cancer. And that doesn't feel like a coincidence. This almost feels like a wink and a nod to that period of time. And the reason for that is at the time I'm recording this, Mercury is about to go retrograde. Mercury's in shadow right now. It's been in shadow since June 30th. It'll be in shadow till August 25th. And it's retrograde from approximately July 17th through April 11th. I never pay attention much to Mercury retrograde because I'm born with Mercury retrograde, and a lot of people are, because it's the most common retrograde. It's retrograde about 9 to 10 weeks of the year. But it's good to pay attention when it is affecting macro collective things. And so Mercury is going to station direct on August 11th at 4 degrees of Leo. Mars stationed retrograde at 5 degrees of Leo. That's interesting to me. And then Mars station direct at 17 degrees of Cancer, which is where the sun is right now. I don't know. This feels like a little bit of a triangulation. I mean, that's what astrology is. Ultimately, it's pattern recognition. It's seeing what other people don't see. No one's talking about this. I always see this stuff that no one's talking about. And Mercury is the lower octave of Gemini. Well, Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. And Mercury is the lower octave of Uranus. And Uranus went into Gemini on Monday. And that's part of the reason for some of the changes that are going to be coming, which I'll hint at the end of this episode. And Gemini, as you know, is ruled by Mercury. Uranus is the higher octave. So with Uranus is only in Gemini for 8 weeks in forward motion. We just get a taste. We just get a little taste. And I don't think it's a coincidence that when Uranus went into Gemini, Neptune was already retrograde, went into retrograde on the 4th, and Saturn was basically stopped. So we're not getting the big bang boom energy. And Pluto, by the way, is also retrograde, and Pluto is like already at 2 degrees. Pluto hit 2.59, which means it's in the range of 2 the day that Uranus went into Gemini. That's not a coincidence to me. I happen to be having a Pluto transit that starts at 5, so I'm really, really tracking the subdegrees. I'm tracking what it feels like at 1, what it feels like at 2, what it feels like at 3, what it feels like at 4. Because the outer planets are like an earthquake, so you really want to kind of prepare for them if you're having a transit. And I felt a huge shift when Pluto went 3 degrees, but I didn't feel it at 2. So I'm preparing, okay, when was it going to be at 3? By the way, it's going to be at 3 on January 10th. It's going to be at 2 degrees on December 5th. So from now through early December, Pluto's not really doing anything. It's in the early degrees. It's technically in Aquarius, but it's going backwards, it's going forwards. I mean, we really, people made a big deal about Pluto entering Aquarius, but it really only got up to 3 degrees. It got up to like 1/10 of the sign. Next year is when it goes full on. It gets up to 5. But so Pluto's going backwards. It's not in play, in my opinion. Saturn stopped. Neptune stopped. And that is when the universe decides we're going to have Uranus in Gemini for a taste. So we're not really getting the full picture here. But the time that Uranus is in Gemini is Mercury is basically in shadow. It is in shadow. It went into shadow June 30th. Or is in post-shadow until August 25th. By the way, Uranus goes retrograde on September 6th, which means it's basically almost stopped on August 25th. So the entire time that Uranus is in Gemini in forward motion, our first taste, the ruling planet of Gemini and the lower octave of Uranus is backwards. So I don't really think we're going to see much. And because Uranus affects collective stuff, I will be doing a deep dive on Cosmic Alarm Clock, the YouTube channel, about that. I'm trying to figure out what's YouTube, what's here, what's going on. And I'll talk about that at the end, but I'll do, a deep dive on the historic of Uranus and Gemini and the political stuff and all that. I did a double episode, when Saturn went into Aries and Neptune went into Aries. I recorded a double episode in February, and something prevented me from dropping it. And I don't know why, but I will be dropping those probably right before Saturn enters Pisces again, which is Labor Day weekend. Because at that point, why don't we wait? Like at that point, we got a whole lot of more data. At the time I dropped those, a lot of astrologers drop it when Saturn enters Aries or when Neptune enters Aries, because that's when the clicks, you're going to get the clicks and the whatever. That's not really my intention with doing this. It's more to document what's happening. So I'm going to let Saturn be in Aries for as long as possible, which means whatever it entered, I think was March. I know Neptune entered at the end of March. I forget when Saturn entered. I think they were both March. I could be mistaken about that. But Saturn goes back into Pisces September 1st. So we have a lot of data coming in, and there's a lot of, so I recorded a bunch of stuff in February, and there was a whole bunch of crazy political shit related to war. And let me be very, very frank about the fact that mundane astrology is not about you. So I have no patience. Everybody thinks astrology is cool right now. People are armchair astrologers. They watch TikTok videos. They listen to Chris Brenner's podcast, which is great. I have nothing against Chris Brenner, but listening to a podcast does not make you a fucking astrologer. And so they have a lot of opinions about people talking about the patterns of war. And I did not make up the fact that when Neptune went into Aries, we had the Civil War. I did not make up the fact that the last time Uranus entered Gemini, we had the World War I and Revolutionary War. So those are facts. And we've had a lot of conflict. And no one's saying war is coming. But I'm also saying don't shoot the fucking messenger. If you don't like that data, if that freaks you out, go find another hobby. Because astrology is not your horoscope. It's not your sun sign bullshit. And that's not the shit I do. This isn't your basic bitch stuff. So if you want that, go elsewhere. I don't fearmonger intentionally because, again, my goal with this is not clickbait. It's not, I don't really know. It's a compulsion to share what I want to share. I always want to make sure my data is accurate. So when I'm not sure and I'm like, I'm not sure about that, I'll tell you that I'm not sure about a date or this or that. But don't shoot the messenger. Patterns are real. Shit's getting real. Life is chaos. And the US had its Pluto return. So when the US hit 27 degrees of Capricorn, I discussed this on this podcast and on the YouTube channel, we hit the degree of our return. We are in the dying. We're in the rebirth phase. So shit's going to get real in the US and people don't want to hear that. People don't want to believe in astrology, but then they're like, wow, everything is so weird. It's like, all right, well, keep listening to Mel Robbins, keep watching television and and everything's going to be okay. If that's what the world you want to live in. But for the rest of us, we're paying attention. And Uranus and Gemini, I cannot wait. You guys know I'm a Uranian. You may or may not know that. I have Uranus on my ascendant. You know that Uranus rules astrology. So when Uranus enters Gemini next May, I cannot fucking wait. It's going to be late April, technically. Because I think the world is going to fundamentally change. And I don't just mean war. I don't mean negative stuff. I mean just communication, technology, social media, all of that. I spent a lot of time on Threads when Jupiter went into Gemini. And that's why I know astrology is real. I never had an interest in being on Threads. I'm a five line in human design. If you don't know what it is, that's more of like the universal broadcaster, kind of what I'm doing here. This is very 5-line. Collective energies meets heretical message, meets futuristic content that other people is going to think is crazy. And then, when my shit's right in 2 years, everyone's like, oh yeah. But then, if I was a financial forecaster, that's one thing. When you're an astrologer, they're always going to call you batshit because that feeds the narrative. I had someone the other day say, well, I don't believe in energy. I'm logical. And I was like, I have a Ivy League mathematical engineering degree. I have a second master's in functional medicine. I have an MBA. You have like a degree in journalism. Who do you think would be like considered to be more logical, math-based, like in the traditional way of like how brains work? Logic. Me or you? It's like people just want to believe what they want to believe because they want to like, I don't know. They want to think that like they can control everything. They want to think that everything outside of facts is for suckers. I don't really know. I don't get it. I'll never get it. But the point is that this is a very 5-1 message, and Threads is very 4-line energy. If you're not familiar with the human design, don't worry about it. But the profile lines kind of are layers of a house. 4-line is like networking, water cooler, peer-to-peer. A lot of local businesses are 4-line. It's a lot of buddy. And so Threads is kind of that energy. And I'm not that person if it's not obvious. So it's kind of interesting to me that I joined in last May of last year. And I think that's when Threads really started to take off. Now, Threads is one of those weird places that if you're not on it, you don't think anyone uses it. But if you're on it, it's got a lot of users. It's this weird subculture. And that was when Uranus went into Gemini. I did a episode on my main channel, YouTube channel, The Aligned Alchemist, where I talked about Jupiter going to Gemini. That was my last timely astro transmission. I don't do any astrology on that channel anymore at all. And it just is a different algorithm. So that's why it doesn't work. And right after that happened, I joined Threads. And right around the time that Jupiter left Gemini, which was when Jupiter entered Cancer in June of this year, I left Threads. And I've been on there haphazardly, like talking about gardening. I garden, so I was like talking about my garden. I don't give a fuck about selling anything on there. I barely promote my podcast. I don't even know why I'm on there anymore. I think it's kind of like habit. So I'm kind of like moving away from that a little bit. And I mused on there was like, I wonder why it felt so flat as soon as Uranus entered Gemini. And I realized it was because Uranus is about authentic connection. You're listening to me because you're into what I'm saying. And 90% of the population is going to think this is a batshit podcast. But 10% of them are going to be like, wow, this is fucking genius. That's Uranus. It's kind of like finding your people, which is true of any business, but it's even more true in 2025. And that's what a lot of what I talk about on the Unscripted Path. That's for business owners and entrepreneurs and creators. And Gemini is about communication, but I think it's about authentic communication. And as you know, historically, Gemini wasn't the internet. Gemini was about local environment. Third house. 11th house is about the internet. Third house is Gemini is not about. Now the lines are blurred, but I think people are craving in-person connection more than ever. So Uranus and Gemini, I think, is really asking us to go back to authentic connection, whatever that means to you. I think it's going to be a combination of, I'm doing a lot more in-person networking. It's interesting. I just signed up for this thing at the State House where I live to protest rodenticide. So rodenticide is like what people use to put rats. The state's been using that to kill rats in the subway and stuff like that. But then owls and other osprey eat it and they die painfully, painful death. And so there's a rally at the State House to lobby against it. It's like an all-day event. And like, I don't live near the city and I'm planning to drive there. It's going to be a huge pain in the ass to get there in the morning, do the thing. I had to decide today and I signed up. And I'm like, I don't have time for this shit. And I'm going. And that's very Uranus and Gemini. It's like a humanitarian collective effort of something you believe in, of like-minded individuals in your local day-to-day environment. So it's kind of, that's what I kind of see Uranus being. It's going to be an interesting, and again, I don't think we're going to get to see it because, as you know, this podcast is mostly probably listened to Americans. If you don't live in California and you don't live in Arizona and you don't live in Texas where it's like 100 degrees all the time, for the rest of us, unofficial summer is Memorial Day through Labor Day. So the entire time that Uranus is in Gemini, people are kind of at the beach. So social media always dips in the summer. So I don't really think we're going to get it any sense. Might have some, batshit global events happen. We've had a lot of stuff that's happened in the court systems and this and that. I totally could expect some crazy batshit collective stuff because remember, Uranus is collective energy. This is an outer planet. This is not about you unless you're having a transit. So, there could be some crazy news shit that comes in and of course I'll talk about it. But I think that in terms of really seeing the patterns of society, we're going to get a taste. Famous last words. We've still got about 7 more weeks of this. So, whatever. But I can feel the shift already. And obviously people who are drawn to this kind of work feel these energies more, right? I have collective circuitry in human design, which means I kind of feel the collective transformations going on in society. And so this podcast was collective, the collective psyche. So in line with that, I think that's a lot. 18 minutes. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say. So Mercury retrograde, full moon in Cap, Cancer moon, Jupiter in Cancer, and all of that. These episodes are a little bit more about like what's going on versus like how to work with this personally. I think it's probably because I talked about how to work with this personally on my other podcast. So I'm not really feeling the need to talk about that right now. This is more of a collective psyche type of vibe. Hence the name Cosmic Alarm Clock. And so, that whole podcast, that whole project was really geared for the collective shift. And let's face it, the collective shift has happened. We had Pluto entering Aquarius. We had Neptune entered Aries, Saturn entered Aries. I haven't dropped those episodes, but I will. Well, now we have Uranus and Gemini. And part of me is feeling a shift with this. I think that's probably even why I decided to come back on here. Partly because I was thinking about having having an astrology podcast. So I was like, why don't I just take the one I've already got and rename it and launch it? So I think there's going to be a change to the name of this podcast. And I think it's because Cosmic Alarm Clock was about a wake-up call for the collective. And for better or for worse, the wake-up call's over. We have the people who are awake and we have the muggles. And there's still more to say about the collective energies. I'm sure I'll do something when everything goes back And we'll see, like, I don't even know, because if I do this stuff in September, it's already kind of gone back. We're already but I'll probably have something next year when everything goes in for good. Maybe in about a year, and say, okay, here's where we're at. That could be like a special episode. But in general, there's not, I don't really know. There's a shift. So I think that this podcast is going to shift. And I don't know if I'm going to do that. I'm not going to change the name today because I got a lot to do today. But I'm going to release this episode today. And that tells me Capricorn Full Moon, you take the first step on whatever is the next thing. And full moon is illumination. I have some ideas. I'm not going to share them right now because it's not going to be the same thing. It's not going to be just like an episode, a podcast on Spotify. You'll probably have a Substack. It'll probably have a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel will probably change to reflect the name of this. And it may be a video podcast eventually. And also, it probably will be a combination of subscription and free kind of a thing. I'll have a certain number of episodes I drop every month, and for people who want my deeper dives, that kind of a thing. So we're playing with that. I'm playing with that. And Substack's a great place for that. And that's kind of like a very Aquarian model. I like YouTube because YouTube is a very Aquarian model. It's like if people watch your video, you get credit. Even if they don't like it, even if they don't comment. Podcasting, you don't get that. And my other podcast fuels my business. So that's different. I'm not, people hire me off with a podcast. That is a different monetization model. And even if you're not a business owner, you don't care about this, I don't really care because things cost money. And part of Aquarius is supporting the things that you care about. Right? So putting your money where your mouth is part of Aquarius. I like the idea of the tribe supporting the tribe. No one's fucking getting rich off a paid podcast, by the way, especially not an astrology paid podcast. What it is it is a contribution to the bigger effort, the bigger collective effort. And so that's kind of what my vision for this is. And it's still forming, and it probably will be forming for the next 6 months. I'm not committing to anything right now. No one, by the way, no one should be committing to anything long term. This is where Saturn is in your chart, obviously, until Feb of next year, because we're in the backwards to go forwards right now. And I rarely going to make such a vehement statement to you because astrology is the sky and we live our life. I'm never going to tell you not to do something, but I would be cautious about making long-term commitments right now. And my mind goes to business because that's my audience and most of my stuff. Taking a job to me is less of a big deal. You just quit. But I mean, yeah, taking a job is also, because then you're there for a while. And what are you committed to for a while, I would say, when you're thinking about things right now? That's all I would say. Because there's a lot of confusion. We don't know. I mean, this whole thing could be a fever dream I'm talking about right now. But that's what to expect. That's what's happening. Welcome back. If you're new, hi, my name is Sunitha. I had a podcast here on and off for about 3 years. And we're bringing it back, but we're bringing it back in a new way. So stay tuned. I'll make an announcement here, whatever I decide to do. I'll have an email list soon for people who want to stay in my world to understand all the other things. And on my main podcast, I'll be launching that. My astrology activations are launching. Those are my readings. Those are the only way to work with me one-to-one. Once those launch, I'll put a sales page in the show notes. And those actually haven't been live to the public ever, if you can believe that. I worked with peers. People would contact me. I would post stuff on social media. People would message me. People would contact me. Do you do readings? I'm interested in learning more. It was very much behind the scenes. I was very much a pull strategy. And so I'm finally releasing it to the outside world through a sales page, which means anybody can book it. So that's kind of a big deal. And I think that'll be next week. I'd like to do that in the energy of the full moon, kind of a culmination type vibe. So that's it. Enjoy this summer. You're not going to hear from me again until after the summer is over, meaning like, Labor Day type thing. Labor Day weekend, Saturn stops. No, Labor Day weekend, Saturn goes back into Pisces and Uranus stops. And then it's like, all right, what the fuck was that? That's what that time is. It's like, all right, Saturn's left Aries, Uranus has stopped. Now what? But Uranus is in Gemini until November, and it goes back into Taurus for a while, like 6 months. So we got some energy. I mean, for me personally, unless you're having a transit, Uranus retrograde, it's powerful at the time of the station. It's powerful when it's retrograding, so that's that whole early September time. But I don't really view Uranus retrogrades as having a huge impact on anything. I feel like, you know what? Uranus is the trickster, so who am I to say what the hell it's going to do? It's unpredictable. We're in an unpredictable time. You don't need me to tell you that. See you on the next one.